before taking the new responsibility. He is also the founder, Secretary General of the World Organization of Students and Youth, Sri Datta Hosaballi. I would also like to invite the following distinguished speakers on the stage. Swami Mritrananda Ji, he is the spiritual teacher from Chennai Ocean Bharat. Professor Kunal Mageshan Ji, New Zealand. I am still living in the US. Mohan Rupadas Ji, who is here instead of Gopal Krishna Swami Ji from ISKCON, who could not make it due to health reasons. And Professor S.N. Balagangadhara from University of Grand, Belgium. So we have, just for logistics, so we have a timekeeper, Mamtaji, who's sitting in the front. So all the speakers, when you have 2 minutes remaining for your time, Mamta is going to flash a card, and when you have 0 minutes remaining for time, she'll flash another card. So if you could please keep on time, it'll be much appreciated. And with that, and there is a remote control over here for the slides. So it has the pointer on the right hand side to move the slides down, and a pointer arrow going to the left to move the slides up if you need it. And I'll be here if you need any help. With that, I'll hand it over to Sri Dattatreya Ji. Namaste.
As we all know, there are distinguished speakers on the dais for this very important session of today. And I should also add, not only that there are distinguished speakers, there are distinguished audience also in this hall. I welcome you all to this session. As we all know, this is the second session of a Hindu Organizational Conference, and the theme of this is, as we know, the Sanghe Shakti Kalau Yuge. And the topic of this session is role of Hindu organizations in positioning, strengthening, defending, and promoting Hindu Dharma in society. The theme of this entire World Hindu Congress is, as we all know, Sangachadvam Samvadaddvam. Sangachadvam Samvadaddvam Sammo Manansi Janatam. This Vedic message, the Vedic expectations from the people of this land and all over the world has been is step together, express together. This togetherness, Sam Gachadvam, Sam Vadadvam. In fact, this underlying message of this Congress itself is the topic of, in a way, this session, that we all have to come together and express together. Yesterday, the collaborating and coordinating part of Hindu organizations, temples, and associations, that was discussed in this hall as part of this conference. Now, the 4 speakers are going to present their various things which we have just now seen. Just I will take, already we have started late this session by 5 minutes. In the beginning, I would like to request all of you to switch off your mobiles. Please check once again, because this instruction is being given repeatedly, and repeatedly the mobiles are making their sounds. So that's why let us see that this session there is no mobile ringing. And also, I request the speakers to maintain time, present their things 11 minutes, and last 1 minute, they will be flashing here. And I think Gunaji, somebody is taking care of flashing? Yeah, fine, she is there. And when the 0 minute is there, I request that sentence should be completed and then the speaker will be allowing the next speaker to speak, so that we will have enough time for discussion. Generally, in such sessions, what happens is, because the speaker encroaches upon others' time, and ultimately the discussion doesn't take place, and the people who come here as delegates, they feel that we have only heard and nobody has heard us, and that should not happen. Hindus. Second is Hindu Dharma for world peace and harmony. Because world peace and harmony is all evasive. For all these years, so many efforts have been taken, they are going on, but how Hindu Dharma is the guarantee for the world peace and harmony among humankind. This we have to position it in such a way. Highlighting Hindu contributions, because many people think that Hindus do not have a scientific heritage, they do not have a strategic thinking. So these things we will have to say how the Hindus have contributed in view of life, in the way of life, both. Years ago, Dr. Radhakrishnan delivered 4 lectures on these things in Oxford University in 1928. We all must be knowing about it. And also for the development of the nation as citizens, wherever Hindus are there, they have contributed immensely for the development of that adopted or host nation. So that also should be highlighted, because Hindus have now become a headache, have not created any trouble for any society. And as at the term Hindu, there may be Sanatana Dharma, there may be Arya Sanskriti, there may be Bharatiyata, many other things. But asserting the term Hindu is very important while positioning ourselves in today's world. Then the strengthening aspect. We have to create awareness, because a lot of misconceptions are there. And there is also Hindus have been on and off Kumbhakarnas. Once in 6 months they get up, and for some time they are aware. And again some Mahapurusha comes, somebody has to come, some avatar has to come, some organization has to come, then they get roused. So again they sleep. This continuous awareness is required. Focus on the next generation. You know the importance of it. I need not explain. Because that is a guarantee for the Hindus in the next century as well. The collaboration and coordination of all Hindu organizations, temples and associations, one whole session was dedicated to this. That's why I do not explain to this. The importance of this has been discussed yesterday. Collective response for bigger role. When Hindu organizations, the previous point, they all come together, the collective voice, because of that strength, we can present our point in a better way, in an acceptable way, in a persuasive way. Defending strategic response is required. Many a time, though we have enough wisdom, knowledge, the strategic thinking is somehow missing. Because of that, many a time we have suffered in the past. There are distortions and denigrations of Hindus, history, their way of life, their approach, their rituals, all these things, they have been denigrated and sometimes distorted, and because of this, even the Hindus do not understand what we really are and what we really want to say. 10 people, 10 different sannyasis, different santas, different sampradayas, they are highlighting some approach, some dimension of Hindu society. That's why there's a lot of confusion. So that's why we'll have to come out with some common thing. So that's why how the misrepresentations, if there are any, will have to be clear. Then the proselytization is another very big challenge. However, socio-cultural challenge, there is another session, so I do not want to dwell much upon that. Confident response and not key, that's required. If we achieve the above, there will be confidence in the Hindu society, and knee-jerk reactions many a time lead to further failure. Promoting Hindu Dharma and civilization and culture, we should have influential presence in all walks of life, wherever we are, in whichever the country we are in, whether it is media or academia or lobbying in political sphere and many other things where the opinion making takes place. So there, the presence of Hindus with influence, with voice, that is required. So that we have to promote it through various activities. World Hindu Congress is one such very great initiative. Presenting universal spiritual values and practices. I would like to say that the universal values we all know. When I say practices, about say yoga, Ayurveda, Vedic sciences, many of these things which have been the soft power of Hindus, they are value practices, they are civilizational practices, and these practices now are being picked up by non-Hindus as well. So that's why these things will have to be promoted so that the establishment of Hindus as universal dharmic value people will be achieved in a better way, in an easier way. That's what I think. With these initial remarks to set the tone, I have now the floor is open for the speakers. I request the first speaker is Swami Sri Mitranandaji. So I request him to present his viewpoint. Swami Mitranandaji's introduction has already been made by Abhayji. Swami Mitranandaji is a dynamic disciple of Pujya Swami Chinmayanandaji of Gita Jnani Yajna, we all know. He serves as the spiritual teacher of Chinmaya Mission Chennai, Director National Projects Chinmaya Yuva Kendra, which is known as CHIK, and publisher of Chinmaya Udghosh, an international youth magazine. Pujya Swamiji, I request you to present your views on whether there can be a common platform for Hindus and Hindu organizations. That will be his topic. Swamiji.
Sadhguru, Sadhguru, Sadhguru. My salutations to everyone assembled here. Pranam. Good morning. Long back, I heard a story, a parable from my guru, Swami Chinmayanandaji. There was a shepherd. He was taking his flock of sheep together. A visitor came on the way and asked the shepherd, "How much wool does your sheep give you every month?" The shepherd asked the traveler, "Black or white sheep, which are you asking about?" He said, "The black." He said, "The black gives me around 2 kgs of wool. So what about the white?" He said, "The white also gives me 2 kgs of wool." Okay. "How much fodder do you feed your sheep every day?" So the shepherd asked, "Which one? Black one or white one?" So the traveler asked, "Which one?" So the shepherd said, "How much?" So the shepherd said, "Which one? Black one or white one?" So he said, "Black one." He said, "Black one takes 1 kg of fodder, and white one?" He said, "White one also takes 1 kg of fodder." So the questions went on, and every time he put a question, the shepherd asked which one, black one or white one. In the end, the traveler asked him, "Why do you ask this question every time when I ask you? You say which one, black one or white one?" He says, "The black ones are mine." "So what about the white one?" He said, "The white ones are also mine." The human mind has an ability to divide anything. The human mind has the ability to find divisions where it is holistic. Our rishis have understood this well. They have understood that the human mind is capable of devising anything, make divisions. Hindu culture accommodates variety of methods. Every method of practice is valid. And since the human mind likes to divide, we must have variety. We cannot serve with one book, one way. We must have variety because the human mind demands variety. So our rishis have given variety of practices. Each practice is valid at its level, at the level. That practice is valid. Yesterday, in the inaugural sessions, we heard few speakers were talking about saying, reduce rituals, focus more on knowledge. No doubt it is important, but please understand rituals are also valid. There are very many practitioners are practicing rituals and they will grow. So Hindu culture accommodates all practices. So when we talk about Hindu organization commits to one practice. Various Hindu organizations commit to one practice. Someone may be following Nirvikalpa method, Nirguna method, the formless worship. Someone may follow form worship. Someone may follow bhakti, someone may follow jnana, someone may follow karma, someone can follow yantra, someone can follow tantra, someone can follow mantra. Varieties are plenty and all are accommodated. So if we are going to talk about Hindu organizations coming together, we should never even attempt coming together on the theological level. At theological level, we admire the divisions, we admire all paths. But there are certain areas where we have to come. For religions, apart from Hinduism, coming together is so easy. They have a theological enemy. When they have a theological enemy, that brings them together. Hindu culture is all accommodative. It cannot have a theological enemy. It is impossible. That's why we are the ones who keep saying Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, whole universe is a family, not world. Our gods are called Vishwanath, not just the world, Lord of the world, we call Lord of the universe. So we have a very broad universal vision, which has the depth to accommodate all methods. That's the beauty of Hinduism. If any religion reaches to its zenith, it will have the same depth. Hinduism has reached the zenith long ago. That's why it accommodates. And please remember, the varieties which are there is so well accommodated and it has survived and still survives and will continue to flourish even in coming times because the depth it has. Now, when organizations are holding on to one aspect, it is impossible to come together on theological front. But we can come together on certain threads. For example, Bharat, when we say Bharat is shrinking, please understand. 1,000 years ago, what we called Bharat and what we call now is shrinking. It has come less in size. So Bharat shrinking is a warning which we need to wake up because it is shrinking. We were quite wide and vast and we have lost many geographical places and we have shrunk. Now, why have we shrunk? The places where Hindu culture was no more daily practiced, Hindu dharma, people moved away, accepted some other faith. That place lost identity called Bharat. So Bharat shrinking is one warning we need to take because we cannot afford to shrink further. We need to be together. When India went out, Bharat went out, sorry. When Bharat went out on nuclear power, Abdul Kalam said, strength respects strength. That's a very powerful statement. We need to show our strength to be respected. We cannot become smaller further. So now this is one area all organizations can come together saying, we do not want to shrink Bharat together. Or we can come together like yesterday's presentation Swamiji made on temple funds. Now on that we can come together. All organizations can definitely come together and say temple funds must be used for Hindu culture. Female infanticide which happens in our land, for that we can come together. So these kind of issues we can sort down. On these issues we can definitely come together and together we can raise our voice, together we can make people hear us. When do we come together? Where is the togetherness of Hinduism? Traditionally we have a method called Kumbh Mela. Kumbh Mela is a place where many wings, many organizations, many methods, followers of all this come together. It's one of the largest, or rather the largest congregation upon earth. It is this strength we need to try and tap. So here, togetherness, if an organization like VHP can work out, because it has to be done by a common organization, a neutral organization, it can't be done by another spiritual organization practicing a method. A neutral organization should tap these resources, identify, and if we can network there, together we can voice out. This many sants, this many organizations, this many people together demand this. For example, it can be a demand, together we can make a demand, restore the properties of the Kashmir Pandits. Now this many people voicing together, these kind of togetherness we can tap, try doing it, do a network in a place like Kumbh Mela. In Chennai some years ago, we started a program called Hindu Spiritual Service Fair. Sri Gurumurti ji and me, we took this initiative, and for 6 years we have done this, continuing again. In this, what we did, we brought Hindu organizations together for a fair. Like you have book fair, like you have industrial fair, Hindu Spiritual Service Fair. We brought various organizations together, and each one was given a stall. And in the stall, they depicted what work each organization is doing and their own literature for sale, books for sale, souvenirs for sale. So people who walked into it saw in one go variety of practices of Hindu culture. This was a great revelation to many people because members of each organization started admiring other organizations. For example, in Chinmaya Mission, we run around 90 schools, Chinmaya Vidyalayas. When we went into Ramakrishna Mission stall and saw their details, Ramakrishna Mission runs 1,500 schools. A great admiration went to Ramakrishna Mission for the cause, what they're doing. This exhibition or fair made us admire. When we looked into Vivekananda Kendra, we saw they run around 80, 90 schools only in Northeast India. So the mutual respect and reverence came when we went into this. So this is another area where we can think of coming together. An organization like VHP has to look into organizing this fair in every town. Maybe once in 3 years. And it can shift from one place to another. So the members from the town come there, see what all these organizations to do. What are the work, what are the seva these organizations do. And in the fair, what we organized was, in the end, when you're walking out into the last stall, when you're walking out, in the walkaway area, we put a banner. Together, how many schools we run, Hindu organizations. Whoever were part of that fair. Together, how many hospitals we run. Together, how many temples we run. So this was demonstrated. So public, when they came, they saw, saying this is the collective reach of service. And which also showed the size of Hindu strength. Like I said, strength respects strength. This showcases the strength. It comes together. Once the network of these organizations can be done well, probably common demands we can make. That way, on non-theological, social issues, which are a threat for Hinduism, in that area, all the organizations can certainly come together. I thank the organizers for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Vishwa Hindu Parichat New Zealand, Professor Guna Maheshanji will be presenting some successful experiment in positioning and strengthening Hindu society, with particular reference to the country where he is living, in that New Zealand. Sri Gunaji's detailed parichaya has already been made by Abhayji. Gunaji.
When we were setting up this conference, we thought about the topics and themes and how to experiment in one place and show to others so that they can also replicate it. This one is successful experiment in positioning and strengthening Hindu society. This is a case study from New Zealand. Although I should have been doing for all, but we thought it is better to show one case study and request people to follow or adapt that one to different countries. So, taking from New Zealand, we call Aotearoa. Aotearoa is the original name in Maori of New Zealand. Hindu community has been there in New Zealand for more than 100 years. As we all know, Hindus are peace-loving, law-abiding, coexisting and contributing community. This is our strength, because wherever we go, we do not demand for things for our survival, but we go and contribute to the community, and that is the strength we have to show. There was no Hindu identity when Vishwa Hindu Parishad was formed in New Zealand. That was in 1996 when our Ravi Kumar Iyerji came. He was a pracharak. But it was for 10 years we studied the organizations, the people, the associations, the Hindu associations. In 2006 we launched Hindu Council and we really registered it. That time no newspaper know what word Hindu is. And that is when we thought of organizing the first Hindu conference. And the last sentence, of course, it is part of the next slide I am going to show. We are very much approached by the government agencies for the work we have done for the community. We have been working, as I mentioned, since 96, and we registered in 2006. And please note that all the government agencies have looked after us, and in fact most of the funding for our all functions come from the government organizations and charitable organizations. And in 2010 we became the member of ECOSOC, United Nations Economic and Social Organization. I understand there are 4 or 5 organizations from Bharat who are members of that. And usually it is given to international organizations. But this is the only organization, although it is a country specific, we got it. Most importantly, this is the only organization with name Hindu in ECOSOC. Of course, the mission is to strengthen and organize Hindus in New Zealand, and I will come. And the most important one is to, as Swamiji mentioned, to bring like-minded organizations and institutions together. And we formed HOTA, which I will be explaining a bit later on. And yesterday we had full presentation by our Mamta Vikaji, who spoke about HOTA. Now, positioning ourselves. You can see in the picture, I don't know if you can see clearly, but Prime Minister speaking in the first conference. Behind her, it is Rama Janmabhoomi temple. Interestingly, when we approached the Prime Minister to come to our conference, you know, the standard letter we got, oh, she has been preoccupied, she may not be available. I worked for New Zealand government at that time. She is my boss, sort of thing. I don't know what happened. I wrote 2 lines email from my office email to Prime Minister. If 80,000 Hindus are not important for you, so be it. We will invite the opposition leader to open our conference. After 2 days, I got a phone call from Prime Minister's office. Oh, program has changed, she is coming. I said, no, give me in writing. So they wrote the email, then we launched, made the media release that Prime Minister was coming. That is the strength, you know. As Swamiji mentioned, strength makes strength. When we show the number to the politicians, you know, it happens. Because of preoccupations and elections, we couldn't bring our Prime Minister here, but at least the Prime Minister of New Zealand came to the first Hindu conference. This conference made many people to look at it. It was like a big bang, and we presented the statistics also. For example, see, in terms of the education, I'm going to concentrate on only the last 2 ones. In terms of bachelors and postgraduates, Hindu community is at least twice compared to all the other communities in New Zealand in terms of percentage. When it comes to the masters and doctorate level, we are 3 times compared to other people. This is our people, wherever I have gone, we have done very well and we have been contributing. This conference gave a real high profile to VHP as well as the whole Hindu community, because we have invited all organizations to come and many people were appreciating that this is something positive happening. Of course, there are people who write negative, they even complained. Our own lady Indian from Mumbai who wrote to Prime Minister, opposition party everywhere, why Prime Minister went to, she used extremist conference. So the New Zealand police, they investigated without our knowledge. We came to know that later. The president is a very well-known business person. He is from Fiji, not even from India. General Secretary was me. I was reasonably known scientist for New Zealand organization. Our treasurer was a manager of, the people who do the survey, which party wins and that sort of. So he was the. So when they investigated with a right mind people working for this organization, the police became close to us. That was in a way, it was a positive for our. So since then, the government, whatever policies they make, they send a copy to Hindu Council to get their comments. So that itself is a very positive. Although there are many organizations who have been before us, although we are new, policy, in terms of government policy, we are the contributing people. And even before we completed, we announced the second conference, which boosted many people, that these people are not going to lie down there, they are going to go on. The second conference, we brought the king of Maori community. Maori king doesn't go anywhere. And it was the first time he has gone to a public function and he happened to be our conference. And I had spoken to him saying that, look, the Maoris and Hindus are similar. We have, even if you take problems, we have similar health problems. If we look at other things, features wise, everything are common, you should be coming. And he blessed us with his presence. Then to strengthen the Hindu community, we organized the youth conferences, the elders conference, to go into the medical system where lots of white people, nurses, psychologists, doctors, we organized 2 health seminars. One of the topic was medication to meditation. And the topic itself attracted 200 doctors. Medication to meditation. And initially we started, when that lady started the problem, writing to the newspaper and likewise, the funding was trying to be cut down. So I want to study whether it was for the organization or is for the festival. So we started one festival called Rotorua Deepavali Festival. The beauty of this one is, this is smoke-free, alcohol-free, meat-free, and also Bollywood-free. And initially people said, even our own Indian community said, no, the white people, you are inviting all of them, you have to provide liquor, you have to provide meat. I said, look, this is our policy. If it is a failure, I will take it. If it is a success, you take it. And it happened that first itself is 3,000 people attended, and Rotorua is only 60,000 people. Very small place. And the beauty is, the government newsletter, they published our Rotorua Deepavali Festival in their front page. That itself is a very positive thing. And the Human Rights Commission, they gave a certificate. We don't expect any certificate from anybody, but they themselves said, oh, please have it. And the whole purpose of this one was to expand in different areas, like we have Hindu Heritage Center, Social Services Foundation, Education Foundation, Elders Foundation, youth. Likewise, we have number of organizations which are growing, and most of them things are, we are experimenting in New Zealand. For example, we have HOTA conference today, but this experiment was done in New Zealand. And HOTA General Secretary is our Mamta Bika, who is looking after the time today. Then this is in terms of organizing, it's not only for Hindu organization, we went for all dharma related organizations, like Buddhist, Thao, Shinto, like that. And that is when we formed HOTA Forum. And we also run very regular camps, but we work with all organizations to come together to make sure this happens. We also have the volunteer training program so that they are all in similar thinking, so that what we are trying to achieve. And one of the strengths of our Hindu Council is working with the indigenous community. And we have very good relations with Maori community, and last year, 3 years ago, leaders of I think 20 organizations came to Elders Conference in Bharat. They were very impressed. They are very keen to come. Let's see how things work out for the next year conference. Working together is very more important, as Swamiji said, and this is the focus whatever we do. And if people from different countries can take that concept, and we in fact, some of the ideas for HOTA came from HMEC, which Abhiyaji runs in US. And we work with government agencies very seriously. And police, you see, we have one police in uniform doing mantra. This will never happen in Bharat. Huh? It can happen only. And yesterday you saw so many media came. Huh? So likewise, we work with all the media and other people. We work individually. We build such a good relation so that they write positive, not only positive, at least they write neutral about us. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you, Professor Gunaji. You have taken all of us to New Zealand, the Hindu Rashtra. And now I request the third speaker in this session is Sri Mohan Rupadas. He is from ISKCON. He is a graduate from Delhi University. He joined ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, 1990. Heads most vibrant and one of the biggest ISKCON temple here. And under his leadership, volunteers and devotees have distributed more than 500,000 of Bhagavad Gita copies and 10 million other Vedic and related literatures. There are temples in Delhi and National Capital Region in the area of his activities. Now I request Mohan Rupadas to share his views on the successful experiments that they have done. It is taking Hindu Dharma global, reaching the unreached.
Hare Krishna. So first of all, I'd like to thank the organizer for inviting us for this session. And I once read in a newspaper, it said that Hinduism will be in minority in next 50 years. So I was surprised to see that, because if you actually carefully see all over the world, if you go all over the world, actually Hinduism is growing. And not only in our Bharatvarsh, but all over the world, in America, in Europe, in Africa, and on all the major continents, you will find the Hinduism is growing far and wide. Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya of International Society for Krishna Consciousness, when he went to London, as he arrived at the London Heathrow Airport, one reporter asked him, Swamiji, what did you get from India? So he said, I've got spiritual wisdom, spiritual knowledge for you, which you missed. Because you have been in India for over 300 years, but unfortunately, you didn't actually carry the spiritual wisdom, the spiritual knowledge, which is a rich heritage of our country. So that I've got for you. So, I'd like to show some few slides. This is Dr. Basham. He is heading the Department of History in London. And he says the Hare Krishna movement organization is historically very significant. For now, the first time since the days of the Roman Empire, an Asian religion is being openly practiced by people of Western origin in the streets of Western cities. So, not only the Indians, but we see many Americans, Europeans, they have taken this path of Krishna consciousness all over the world, and especially the academians and the scientists and the professors, they are also taking very seriously. So many major universities, like in Harvard University, there is a department called Department of Spiritual Studies, where Bhagavad Gita is being taught. Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So this text is being used, Bhagavad Gita is being taught in the Department of Spiritual Studies in the Harvard University also now. And in many of the American universities also, now Bhagavad Gita is also part of their syllabus. And there's something about the ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which was founded by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So he was a sannyasi from Bengal, a Gaudiya Vaishnava sannyasi, who traveled across the globe. And in 1965, he traveled outside India. He went to New York all alone. He had only $7 with him, with a bunch of books, Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto in 3 volumes, around 200 copies he took with him. And arrived at New York all alone, and practically he didn't knew that whether he should take a left turn or a right turn. And he started staying in a Bowery Street, where a lot of hippies used to come. And these hippies, they were actually from the elite classes, because America had attacked Vietnam in 1965. So many young Americans and boys, American boys and girls, they became hippies. And they were into taking drugs and other, marijuana and many other things. So Prabhupada went there and started staying in that area and preached to them the message of the Bhagavad Gita and made them to chant the holy names of the Lord. And first time Srila Prabhupada in the history of America, you can say, he started chanting the holy names of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So this was under the tree in Topsky Square Park, New York. And all along he was sitting there, and many American boys and girls, they came, and they also started chanting Hare Krishna. And Prabhupada was not very fanatic about that. He gradually trained them up in the culture of Krishna consciousness, and they grew up very, very fast. And they started reading the message of Bhagavad Gita, and with their help actually, he spread the message of Bhagavad Gita all around the world in just span of 11 years. And now we have more than 500 centers all around the world. And during his time, before his departure, before he passed away in 1977, he established more than 100 temples around the globe. And we have a lot of vegetarian restaurants also, 100 vegetarian restaurants also. And we have more than 30 eco projects also, schools with a wide variety of community projects. We have farm communities, and through this we are trying to spread the message of Hindu Dharma. And these are the centers around the world in all the major continents, South America, you can say North America, and Russia, CIS countries, and even in African countries, India, you can say, and then Australasia, all those areas we have centers. And these are the number of centers. In Africa, we have more than 43 centers, temples, including the places of congregation. In Asia, we have over 77, in Europe 110, India over 200, in Northern America 105, in Russia and CIS 107, South America we have almost 65 centers. And also we are the world's biggest publisher of Vedic scriptures, and our Bhagavad Gita has been translated in more than 70 international languages, and all other books have been translated in more than 80 international languages all over the world. Recently we got Bhagavad Gita translated in Chinese language and also in Mongolian language. Mongolia is a very small country, and there is a language called Pidgin language, and there are only 40,000 people speaking this Pidgin language. And now the Bhagavad Gita has been translated in Pidgin language also. So all over the world people are reading Bhagavad Gita as it is. So we have more than 43 titles in more than 80 languages, and over 500 million books have been published and distributed. And this is a picture of a school. We have a school, Hare Krishna school in Ghana, in Africa, So one of our American sannyasis has been visiting there. You can see a lot of African students, they are chanting Hare Krishna and they are studying Bhagavad Gita also. And also we are distributing free prasadam, offered to the Lord. And we are distributing free prasadam in more than 7 countries. And then we have a temple in Durban also in South Africa. And Nelson Mandela ji, he also visited the temple. He inaugurated the temple, the South Africa Durban temple. And then we have a lot of festivals in Europe because there people get attracted to festivals, especially this Polish Woodstock festival is very famous. And you can see more than 3 lakh people, they gather, they participate in the festival. We have a nice Hare Krishna prasadam for them and they chant and dance in ecstasy. And then we have farm communities, I mentioned. We have more than 73 Goshalas worldwide, 11 Goshalas in the Eastern Europe. And this is a photo of the United Nations recognized ISKCON Vedic village. It's known as Krishna Valley. It's in Hungary and it's developed a lot. And then we have a college in Belgium. We have a devotee here from Belgium, Radha Desh. We call it Radha Desh. So we are devotee from Belgium. So we have a Bhaktivedanta college. And courses we have been offered in Vedic theology and is being recognized by university in England. And this is a picture of Mongolian devotees. Mongolia is a country where the temperature now is less than 0, that means minus 30 degrees Celsius. And their Mongolian devotees, they are chanting Hare Krishna and they study Bhagavad Gita as it is in Mongolian language. So devotee, His Holiness Bhakti Vaibhav Swami Maharaj, he is a devotee from Czechoslovakia. And he travels there, he goes there regularly and preaches to them. And this is a recent, very latest picture of Chinese Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam also is being translated in many international languages. Srimad Bhagavatam recently was translated and published in Chinese language. And one of our devotees, she is a Chinese lady, Janva Devi. And we are presenting the Chinese Srimad Bhagavatam here. And also we are teaching Hinduism in the colleges. There is a Department of Hinduism and we are heading the Department of Hinduism in Hong Kong. And there's a Chinese universities and our ISKCON devotees, they are actually teaching Hinduism there. And they are quite often come to India also. We take them to many places of pilgrimage in India. Yeah, Department of Hinduism. That's in Hong Kong. Yeah. And also we are preaching in a big way in Russia and CIS also. There's a street Harinam Sankirtan in Moscow, in Russia. And there's a very big festival, Ukraine is called the Black Sea Festival, where more than 12,000 devotees assemble and we have a lot of discourses by different ISKCON leaders and sannyasis and they gather together and they have a very big, huge Harinam there. Black Sea Festival, it's called the Black Sea Festival. And this is a picture of a South American place and this is Lima, Peru and it's a photo of Harinam Sankirtan there.
I think you'll have to...
Just another 2 minutes I'll take. And this is a presentation by His Holiness Radhanath Swami. He's training the working professionals in the corporate sectors in the South American region. And we have other organizations also preaching Hinduism like Swaminarayan. Some of our devotees are here from Swaminarayan also. They are preaching in Africa, USA, Europe, India and Oceania. And there's Swaminarayan temple in London also. And other Vaishnava Sampradayas like Pushti Margi Vallabh Sampradaya, they are also preaching in USA. It's called Braj. And one Sri Sampradaya Vaishnava Sannyasi, Chinna Jayar Swami, he's also a very prominent preacher preaching in USA. That's all. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hindus will ever be grateful to Srila Prabhupada and also the ISKCON movement to the world over for the human services they have done to the Hindu society and in their human work in spreading the Hindu and particularly Hindu scriptures and Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam in popularizing all over the world. Now I request Professor S.N. Bal Gangadhar, who is a popularly known as Balu, and the Hindu intellectual world, and that way the intellectual world today knows Balu very well and reads a lot about him and his works. Professor Bal Gangadhar has been a professor in the Ghent University in Belgium. One of the very important challenges, that is the intellectual challenges that the Hindus are facing, and what should be our response. Sri Balu will be dealing with this subject now. I request him to enlighten all of us on this particular area where he has been very fiercely working.
Chairman, sir, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Actually, I'm the odd man out. We've heard success stories, we have spiritual leaders, we have an extraordinarily organizational leader in front of us. And now I have to do an exam. You see, normally I take exams in the university. Now I have to do an exam. The exam is this. I must move you from these wonderful stories, success stories, good stories, into a rather depressing story. The question is, how can I do it and still catch your attention? I don't know. After the exam, tell me please whether I have succeeded or failed. I want to talk about two dimensions, just dimensions, of problems that face us, our culture, our society. Here, in this country, and outside. In a way, you know these problems, but in a way, I don't think you quite appreciate the depth of the problem. I just want to take two aspects. You see, we have heard, we are facing the problem of proselytization, conversion of people, and I'll focus only on one religion which I have studied for the last 40 years, Christianity. In some senses, I would say, that is not a serious problem at all. Because, this is important, there is a far more insidious problem, far more dangerous problem, far more poisonous problem, which is the other phase, the second phase of the coin of proselytization or conversion. And that is what I call secularization of Christianity. Ever since the birth of Christianity, I won't bother you with the history, there has been two phases to the expansion of Christianity. One is a well-known conversion, where people are converted into Christian religion, doctrine and practices. But there's a second, which today is the dominant form of conversion, which is secularized translation of Christian ideas, which we all have accepted. I mean, every one of you has accepted in the name of science, modernity, rationality, and so on. This is secularization. I will explain in the course of this talk with some examples. This is the first problem that confronts us. The second problem, which has to do with 1,000 years of colonialism, both Islamic and British, because of which we suffer, we all of us suffer from what I call colonial consciousness. Now these two together, or in some senses, perhaps the greatest challenges facing us, especially our children in the 21st century world. Let me take 4 examples, and I'd like to say, when I give examples, I'll be mentioning names, but I'll not be attacking the individuals. They're just to illustrate, that's all. They're not to give evidence of my claim, but just to illustrate what it is. You see, the British had what they called the civilizing mission in the world. They wanted to civilize us. Let me just take 2 dimensions from that, or 4 dimensions perhaps, 4 aspects if you like. The first is this. They found that we were an immoral people, we were a corrupt people. That's one aspect, ethical dimension if you like. And they found that we were uncivilized and dominated by superstition. You know all this, you say. Why talk about it today? You see, this is where colonial consciousness comes in. Because today, in the 21st century India, we are reproducing all these 4 aspects with an incredible power, as though the British had never left us. Let me take an example. The British found us extremely dirty people, unclean people. The civilizing mission was that the government should teach hygiene to Indians, the colonized subjects. Isn't Swachh Bharat exactly that? Government teaching people how to be hygienic. What is the difference, if any, between Swachh Bharat and what British tried for 200 years to teach us cleanliness? Of course, our public toilets are very dirty. Of course, our public offices are badly kept. But I'll come back to it in a minute. But the point is the idea that it is a task of a government to teach hygiene to its people is one of the civilizing missions which the British carried out in India for hundreds of years. And we are doing it very proudly today. One dimension. Second dimension. The British found us incapable of ruling ourselves. They found us corrupt. They found us immoral. They found that we did not deserve the independence that we got, even though they were forced to give under pressure. Have situations changed? Today we all believe, most of us at least, that most politicians are corrupt. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. We found a party, Aam Aadmi Party, to remove corruption from Indian administration and Indian politics. A section of us vote for them. I'm told 20%. We're convinced when you go to petrol bunk that will be cheated, in the sense we won't get a full petrol. When you give a cars for servicing or smartphones for repairing under warranty, we are afraid that they won't do it properly and cheat us. We say, in the words of my brother, hum sab log chor hai. We talk that way in the streets every day about ourselves. Tell me, how are we today different from what the British thought about us? This is one aspect. Second aspect. Francis Xavier, the famous patron saint of the Catholics, wrote to the Emperor of Portugal, "Your Excellency," he said, "the only thing needed today to make Goa pure is to kill all the Brahmins." The British and the Europeans came and told us that Indian society, its religion Hinduism, is backed by the most corrupt system known to humankind called the caste system. Today, Ambedkarites in Karnataka, about 10 years ago, it went on for more than a decade, went to the university classrooms, picked up Brahmin girls, raped them in the quadrangle, and sent them back to the class. Anybody who protested was beaten to death. Today, the same Ambedkarites, every week, go to the university colleges and tell hundreds of children, young people coming from the villages, that Brahmins have to be killed and the best thing is to rape their women. You go to Bishop Conn's College, high school, in the streets of Bangalore, you'll find written on the walls, all Brahmins must be killed. And they find exactly what the British found us, what the European found us, that caste system and Brahmanism destroying India. How different are we from the British today? In fact, the extraordinary thing is, none of these facts are untrue, as I said. There is, so to speak, corruption. But the question is, what kind of corruption is it? We all say our politicians are corrupt. But do we know what it means to speak about corruption and why public officials should not be corrupt? We talk about public interest. They're not defending the public interest. But do we really know what public interest means, even if they put public interest litigation in the court? Do we have words for it? Swartha and Parartha don't translate it. Hitasakti do not translate it. But we say politicians should not be because they're serving the public interest. And we don't even know what public interest means. As I said, it is true. Our institutions, public institutions, like toilets, etc., are filthy, unkept for. But does that mean that Indians are dirty? We need a Swachh Bharat. It is true that one jati oppresses another jati in different parts of India, different parts of this society. Does it mean, therefore, we have caste system? You may say yes, but then I want you to reflect on one thing. The sun, we see it moving on the horizon every day. Does it therefore mean that the sun is revolving around the earth? In exactly the same way, and this is where I end my talk, it's true we face some facts, we see some facts, but the theories we're using to understand these facts are secularized Christian variants, which make our culture, our people, our society immoral, corrupt, backward, and primitive. Chairman, sir, ladies and gentlemen, the challenge facing is simply this: where is that independence that we're supposed to have had? I thank you.
Thank you, Professor Balu, for the very bold and courageous statements that you have made during the course of your presentation. I know there will be a lot of questions and responses to his presentations here. Unfortunately, we are left with very little time for the discussion. The organizers have sent me a note that no tea break should be given, because the next session will also be there in this hall. So I think we can go for a 10 minutes interaction. Those who want to ask something, they can just come to the point immediately, and who do you want to ask the question, please name the speaker, and then you can take it up. I will start from this side. Yeah, I have noted the raised hands I have seen.
प्रणाम। मैं स्वामी मित्रानंद जी और गुणा जी की बातों का आदर करता हूँ, और बाल गंगाधर जी ने बहुत सारे प्रश्न खड़े किए हैं मेरे दिमाग में। अब तो इंटेलेक्चुअल पर्सन है। एक बात मैं और कहना चाहूँगा कि यदि हमारे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में, मंदिरों में, हर मंदिर एक वैदिक पाठशाला और संस्कृत पाठशाला का सपोर्ट करेगा तो हमें बहुत फ़ायदा मिलेगा। एक बात, प्रश्न यह है, क्या स्वच्छ भारत का अभियान अंग्रेज़ों की सीख है? क्या हमारे ऋषि मुनियों ने हमें स्वच्छ और पवित्र रहने का नहीं सिखाया है? क्या हमारे मंदिर गंदे रहने चाहिए? क्या हमारी माताएं जो पवित्र नदियां हैं और स्वच्छ और पवित्र नहीं रहनी चाहिए? ये मेरा प्रश्न दिमाग में घूम रहा है। क्यों हम इसको बाहर से आयत किया हुआ मानते हैं? क्यों इनको वैदिक कल्चर से हम नहीं जुड़ते हैं?
Swamiji, I don't deny at all. In fact, we are the cleanest people on earth. Our question is not that. My question is something simple. Do we need the government to teach? Because it presupposes one thing. If a government teaches a people hygiene, that means these people are underdeveloped. My question is that. I'm not saying Ganga should not be pavitra. Our rishis taught us to be pavitra, not just physically, also spiritually. But that is not my question. My question is, do we need a government to teach a people how to maintain hygiene? If yes, what does it mean about governance? This is what the British did in Africa, in Asia, because they said, we are uncivilized and dirty. That's all I'm saying. Of course we need environmental cleanliness. I don't doubt that. But who should teach us that?
Okay. Damleji and then anybody. Okay, you can take it, please.
See, I'm not talking about a reactive way, in a proactive way. We talk about unity, purity, and divinity, and only through purity we get the self-realization, the knowledge from within. And this purity aspect was there. It is not imported from England or anything. So that Swachhata is what we are talking about in outside and inside us. And Vedas have taught us inside purity all along. What Vivekananda talked about, a Hindu keeps his inside pure, whereas a Westerner keeps the outside clean. But my question is this, particularly about the caste system, that we, just like we want to clean Ganges, and Ganges is, made unclean by so many industries. But just the way we want to clean the Ganges, we also have to clean the Sanatana Dharma, which is pure like Ganges, and periodically over a period of time, all this uncleanliness accumulated in that. And as stalwarts and as leaders of Sanatana Dharma, who is sitting here, who in Sanatana Dharma, it is our responsibility to take this challenge and clean Sanatana Dharma and do it a service by disassociating with caste system the way it is practiced. It has nothing to do with Sanatana Dharma. There is no Vedic sanction for caste system the way it is practiced. It is just a social institution, and we should state it such so that we will disassociate it, so that our second generation, particularly in other countries, will feel comfortable in associating themselves with Sanatana Dharma, because they are rational thinkers, scientific thinkers like Vivekananda.
Yes, you made a point. Yeah, thank you. Cleansing the society from within and the culture.
Just a very short remark. Do you know one thing, sir? No person on earth, I repeat, no person on earth to this day has proved that caste system exists in India. And it cannot be proved. The story you are talking about, cleansing Sanatana Dharma from caste system, is a British story, European story about India. Moving of the sun on the horizon does not mean sun is moving around the earth. Presence of jatis do not tell you there is caste system in India. Nobody has proved it, nobody can prove it.
Okay, my basic question is need of Sridhar Damle from Chicago. My basic question is need of clarity about what is Hindu, because many times organization and sampradaya impose their view upon Hindutva, number one. Number two, we need the freedom from sampradaya fundamentalism. And third thing, having the dialogue between the different sampradaya.
Damlaji, it is your observation, not a question, right?
My question is about to Sampradaya. Sampradayas.
The question needs little detailed explanation. Sampradaya, as I understand, is a person, one man, one book, and a set of following who disagree with the rest. Dharma is all inclusive. So Sanatana Dharma, like we can call it, like Swamiji said yesterday, vision, a way of vision, life of vision. It is all inclusive. That's why general statement is way of life. So this is all inclusive. Please understand, there are sampradayas which we need to take them along. And it is very natural from each sampradaya, people would be talking from their understanding because they believe in it and they swear by it. That can lead to fanaticism. What you said, cleanse fanaticism from sampradaya. Nobody can force another sampradaya. They only follow. You understand? The followers are willing. If I understand, the followers are willing. And they can swear by what they say. Now, that is why I said my talk in the beginning, I said the black sheep and the white sheep. Unnecessarily we divide, because if we can see all of them are going towards one. If that vision is there, it is fine. Till people reach that vision, sampradayas have to be accepted. And sampradayas exist because they hold the people together. So that's the difference. And Dharma is all inclusive. Yeah.
Thank you very much. This is a comment to the organizers. Because we're hearing so many important informations, and there's really scholarly concepts which we may have to deal with deep in our own reflection. I suggest that all these talks should be available printed in transcribed form, where the other people who will not be able to speak today, but they may have very important things to say, can write their comments, so that this forum of this international conference for resurgence of Hinduism will actually have a long-lasting impact on those who really care, that they can both make their comment, read all the comments, and then the next meetings we can have some expert analyze all the proposals, so that it will be an ongoing thing where we, year after year, will really become closer to each other to address the more practical parts of life, where people want to see Hinduism, like Mohan Bhagwat spelled it out in the introduction talk, a force of hope and strength for the world, where other systems have really failed to larger degrees of preserving our Mother Earth and our human unity and other aspects. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is an excellent point for the follow-up. Gunamesh, will make a note of it? Somebody?
Sir, I'm T.S. Bal, former police officer from Mumbai. I have a small suggestion and this thing. We had an illustrious past before the invasion of Islam and Christianity or Portuguese on this country. Several shiers and rishis have contributed for the humanity and mankind in the field of science and Ayurveda and various spheres of the life of the human beings. Like Aryabhatta, master astronomer, mathematician, Bhaskaracarya, genius of algebra, Acharya Kanath, founder of atomic theory, Nagarjuna, wizard of chemical science, Acharya Charak, father of medicine, Acharya Shushrut, father of plastic surgery, Varahamir, eminent astrologer and astronomer, Acharya Patanjali, father of yoga, Acharya Bharadwaj, pioneer in aviation technology, Acharya Kapil, 1 minute, I'll just come.
I think most of these things are known. Please come to the.
Can this organization or this platform think of introducing an award on the analogy of Nobel Prizes and on the name of, or in the name of this scientist, and award the contributors in the present age in their name, so that we take our culture to the world level at World Forum? That is the suggestion.
Wonderful. So that's also for you for the follow-up actions of this. I think we have almost reached the third day. No, we are in the second day. Okay.
Sir, my question is, Why should there be VIP lines, VIP darshans, VIP prasads at all Hindu temples that is happening these days?
I think we have discussed this. Huh? VIP like in the temples.
VIP prasad,
Yeah.
That's my question to the chair.
Okay, directly it's not. Anybody wants to answer this question? Among the panel? Is there a VIP used in ISKCON temples?
Yeah, we do have VIP section because VRPs, they expect like this. Because we have to satisfy everyone so that everybody gets connected to the Lord.
There should be no VIPs in the temple, sir.
No, point is,
ISKCON temple sends me messages.
yeah,
VIP parking, VIP.
I agree, but the VIP should not protest.
You have temple trust and organizations which instead of spending money
Yeah.
on healthcare, education of Hindus,
Yes,
they
yes.
spend money on building guest houses, rest houses.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not fair.
I agree to that point, but the only thing the VIPs must be ready to accept if we make the changes.
You make the initiative.
It's okay, no discussion. Yes, yes, if we can convince the VIPs, oh,
If somebody wants a quicker way for a facility or something can be provided, let's not call them VIP. A aged person wants to walk through the queue faster, maybe we should provide some facilities for those people. Yeah. And the fund which goes to the temple would use it well. So, I mean, if the funds are with the temples, okay, assuming that. So that's a facility can be provided, but the term need not be very important person. A person who wants an additional facility for a fee, yeah.
business class. Okay. So, however, there may be some security reasons and others. I think the temple administration should take note of these things because there is a feeling in the society that VIPs do get better treatment than the ordinary people. However, this is a thing for the temple administration to think. No discussion on this particular point. If there is any other point.
I am Mohammandaleshwar Priyabrot Brahmachari from Bangladesh. Once, before 67 years ago, it was also a Hindustan or Bharat. Due to political decision, we became a Pakistani, now Bangladesh. After independence, 71, you see reactionary forces in Bangladesh committing looting, arson, damage and destroy and default innumerable deities and temple and private house and commercial house. The forces committed the same crimes, including rape and ruined 3,600 temples in 89, 90 and 92 in connection with Babri structure and Ram Janmabhoomi. And also in 2001 and 2012 and 2013 and 2014 also. We have never seen, except Vishwa Hindu Parishad, no organization, even ISKCON, Ramakrishna Mission and other so many big organizations. They never issue a press note against the reactionary forces which was happening in Bangladesh. I would request to moderator, please resolve one point on Bangladesh terrorism and Bangladesh Hindu persecution. And we have given so many data in my record. You see, you'll be astonished. In 99, 2,685 villages, 26,354 people, more than 18,000.
Okay, details are there, of course. The point is taken.
How many raped, how many temple. Okay. But I tell you, the Indian government, Modi should come forward and talk to our Bangladesh counterpart. I have given so many 36 points to Swaraj in June.
Maharaj.
Now listen, let me finish. But not yet no discuss on the issue of Hindu minority. So I request you to resolve one point on Bangladesh Hindus.
One day I would like to bring to the notice of the House that the next session is about the human right violations and Bangladesh is one of the victims where the human rights of Hindus are being violated every day. So that's why the entire session is dedicated to this particular topic. So various people are going to make their presentations, and the general discussion, this particular issue can also be taken up. Yeah, the last one.
Mr. Chairman, I want to congratulate the intellectual discussions that's taken place tonight at this conference. But I feel we should have had a commission of resolutions. We have to take resolutions to make what we said effective. And as long as we don't have a commission for resolution, Mr. Chairman, much of what we're saying is going to be wasted. And the energy that is put in today has come out with some very beneficial resolutions. So if we can put forward resolutions and see how effectively we are further from here at the next convention. So please, Mr. Chairman, can we have a committee for resolutions? Thank you.
Okay, I know there are a couple of people who have raised their hands, but because of paucity of time, I have to give some at least a 10 minutes biological break to the people. Now, it has been a wonderful, stimulating sessions and enlightening session because of the presentation, wonderful presentation of the speakers. And you all know we started with Swamiji emphasizing the need for all the Hindu organizations, different associations coming together and making a unified voice for the promotion and also the defense wherever it is needed of the Hindu society, Hindu people. One thing I would like to notice, Swamiji was telling me about the organizing of Hindu spiritual and service fair, particularly in Chennai and Coimbatore and other places in Tamil Nadu. And this is a fantastic example of showcasing what Hindus can do in the field of seva and charity and service. So, Seva Bharati and others, they have been organizing similar activities, and I think in the next April, Bharat Bhushan in April, Seva Sangam in Delhi, in Pragati Maidan. Yeah, so such things are being, because Swamiji was expecting that we should organize such things, and these Seva Sangam, in the name of Seva Sangam, similar activity is being organized by Rashtriya Seva Bharati and other organizations. Okay. And two case studies we have seen. One is the ISKCON's wonderful reaching the remotest corners of this world. Even the non-Hindus have been attracted to the wonderful intellectual and spiritual message of this land, Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavad and other Vedic scriptures and all. And how the Hindus in a very short period, they have made a unified voice of Hindus in New Zealand, and how they have been able to make a visible presence in the community there. That also we have seen. So it all makes us to understand that then not only there is a need, that the need is felt by the people in different countries wherever Hindus are there, including in Bharat. Now the collective voice of Hindus, if it is taking a shape, then the intellectual challenges outside and within, as Professor Balu has very rightly put it, although he has thrown some challenges before us also. So I would like to see that this discussion which he has ignited will be a fruitful discussion if you continue it later or even after this session or even after this Congress. So however, the strengthening, positioning, defending and promoting of Hindu society in various walks of life, that is a dire need today, and from time and again Hindus have been positioning themselves. Down the line there has been some challenges, some threats, some internal problems. That's why we felt that we are weak, others made us weak, whatever it is. So now we have come together. So because of this collective voice, because of this feeling that we should come together, will take us a long way. The Hindu values and the practices that in the beginning which I tried to mention, if those things can be practiced and can be understood by Hindus first and collectively, and is the strength, Sanghe Shakti Kalayuge, the theme of this particular session or the conference. So if we remember that every day and act upon that, then I think these challenges which Professor Balu has tried to mention, there are many more. So those things also can be very successfully addressed. I thank all the speakers for their wonderful presentations and also the delegates for making their useful contributions and interventions. Once again, I thank you all. However, there are two instructions that have come to me from the organizer's side. There is one Sri Vikas Agrawalji, who is a delegate. He has somehow lost his conference kit. It has one iPad, which is very useful for him. So if anybody finds Vikas Agrawal's conference kit, kindly pass it on to the organizers. Tomorrow, we are going to have the plenary session in the convention hall where the inauguration took place yesterday morning. So the plenary session, I would like to underline that it will start 9 a.m. sharp, 8:55. We all should be there inside the hall and occupy our seats so that we start off on time. World Association of Hindu Academics, they are going to have a get-together at party room number 292. I repeat, 292 party room. Today evening at 6:30 p.m. It will go for nearly 2 hours. So these are some of the instructions that again. And we will be having some 7 to 8 minutes break so that we can come back again for the next session, which is, as I have just now mentioned, it is about the human rights, the violations, and particularly of the Hindus' human rights.